You're listening to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to eLearnChat, our new podcast featuring prominent leaders, shakers and movers in the e-learning and training industry. Your co-hosts are Rick Zanotti and Terrence Wing. This episode of eLearnChat is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com and by Liquid Learn at www.liquidlearn.com. Please visit our websites. And here we are. This is episode, I think it's number 16 of eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. And today I'm joined by none other than Terrence Wing.
That's a good choice, Rick. So I think we should keep that one. Hi, everybody in eLearnChat land. This is Terrence Wing. Glad to be with you guys today. As always, Rick lets me do all the administrative stuff. So let me do that and get that out of the way so we can get to our esteemed guest and colleague. The show is being broadcast several places. So for those of you having firewall issues, you can try to catch it here, justin.tv/relatecorp, C-O-R-P. We also simulcast it at liquidlearn.com and on the ISD 2.0 Facebook fan page, and that is facebook.com/ISD20. So plenty of places. We're looking for more places to host it. So we'll keep increasing those simulcast options for you. You can also visit for the archives, you can visit our channel on Vimeo as well, and we'll be sure to tweet that link so you could see it there. For those of you that would like to communicate with Rick, myself, or Aaron Silvers, our guest, please feel free to do so either in the Justin TV chat room, or you can do it on Twitter at #eLearnChat. And, I guess we should give some bad news, Rick, and that is that we're going dark next week. And the reason for that is that we're going to be at Learning Solutions. So Rick is presenting. I know. Rick, I think you're presenting at the Adobe Summit, right?
I'm doing one talk on audio and video with the Adobe eLearning Suite at the Adobe Learning Summit. That's on Monday at 10 a.m. in Orlando. And then a 45-minute talk at the Learning Stage at Learning Solutions on audio basics or audio for e-learning.
And I will also be presenting at Wednesday. Gosh, I forget the time. Shame on me, but it's on the schedule. So I'll be talking about tips, tricks, and techniques to go from low budget to big budget, but mostly low budget e-learning production. So some really neat things. And of course, Rick, I'm going to be showing that avatar, how to build that free avatar.
Ah, great.
That's my favorite thing. Save you $10,000 on that one.
This is true.
And I'll be co-hosting one of the morning bites, so that would be a lot of fun. So that is all the administrative stuff that I have to talk about, Rick. So I'll pass it over to you, back to you, so you can introduce our guest.
Okay, great. And today we have with us Aaron Silvers. But before that, we'd also like to thank all of you for being here today. And if you can, subscribe to the podcast. We are now on vimeo.com/channels/eLearnChat. So we are now on Vimeo. So that's where you're going to see us. Now you'll see it on Justin.tv live, and you'll see us on Vimeo for the better quality recorded version. But without any more delay, let's have Aaron Silvers. Hi, Aaron. How are you today? Can you hear us?
He's speechless, or we've lost our hearing.
Try it again, Aaron. Sorry, for some odd reason, we weren't getting your sound.
You guys hear me?
We hear you now.
Awesome. Terrence, Rick, how you guys doing?
We're doing
everybody
great.
in eLearnChat.
Welcome, doing great.
Aaron.
Good.
Hey, Aaron, tell us a little bit about what you do.
What do I do? So I work for, I spend most of my time working for ADL, Advanced Distributed Learning. It's an initiative out of the Department of Defense. And my particular role is as community manager. And what I try and do is help kind of promote the things that the activities that ADL is doing and kind of create a little bit more public awareness of what's going on and identify opportunities to bring people in and get help the outside get more involved in what the directions that ADL is doing.
And for those who don't know, ADL is pretty much who developed the SCORM standard.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of people involved, but yeah, ADL is kind of the steward. Has been the steward of that effort. Yeah.
Yep. So anybody in the chat room who's got a million SCORM questions, this is your chance. Now you're really nervous, right?
No, actually, that'd be a lot easier for me. So yeah,
that sounds good. So what kind of stuff is ADL doing right now?
Well, a couple things. We're working on kind of finalizing the document set for SCORM 2004.
That's actually not finalized?
Well, it's in 4th edition. What we're trying to do is kind of clean it up so that it goes to ISO, that we get the certification stuff, certification requirements and documentation moving out, so that because there's certification for all these different versions of SCORM, but this latest one, 4th edition, there hasn't been a certification set released yet, and we're going through all sorts of internal DoD legal review to make sure that the process is really, really crisp and clear, and it's can kind of sustain itself. We're doing some very interesting joint projects with a couple different groups. We are working with AICC on CMI 5. We're very interested from as they move forward that there's some backward compatibility with SCORM, and we're looking to see how they how they deal with extending that data model for lots of other different applications. And then we have a research project going on called Project Tin Can that Rust C Software, SCORM.com, is working on with us, and they're gathering requirements for if we were going to do a new API to kind of succeed SCORM or go beyond what SCORM norm does now, what would people want? What are the requirements? What are things that people are having challenges with doing now that they'd like to be doing? And seeing what we can do to address that. Then we're also doing some work with Let's-E's runtime web service project, and we're going to, over the hopefully next couple of weeks, if not the next month, start rolling out some prototypes that will help solve some problems that are commonly being asked for help with.
Now it's interesting. We do a lot of work with LMSs, and we've worked with quite a few of them, mostly SCORM implementations, but also quite a bit AICC. And it's interesting. The LMS is probably everybody's, I guess, biggest pain.
Say it, man. It's okay.
Yeah, but it's funny because the LMSs aren't really that hard. It's just that I think a lot of people don't have any database backgrounds or idea of how to really interconnect. And one of the problems is a lot of the vendors don't follow the SCORM standard quite the same way. They interpret it.
And so I can't really blame all the vendors. It's a really complicated. It's a beautiful mess, but it's a mess, right? And just like anything, I mean, you look at HTML4, look at any kind of spec. The specs always lag behind where the innovation's happening, right? I mean, that's just kind of how specs work, because the specs are like a snapshot of how to do it, right, based on some view of something in the past. And when we look at LMSs and how SCORM kind of approached this problem, this general, like, how do we build content that works across different systems? SCORM captures the best of 1998, 1999 thinking, right? I mean, top-down management of all these different systems, these deep silos was how we approached IT in a lot of different spaces. Today, the world is different, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking to go beyond what SCORM did, because the world's changed.
What would be different? In what way would a learning management system take advantage of maybe more distributed? What would be different?
Well, so there's a couple scenarios that run to my mind. One is, there's a lot more requests to pull information, as a learner than to be pushed information as a learner, right? So the idea is that if we can make good content, quality content, easier to find, and we can know that it's the right content that we're looking for, then getting it to me we shouldn't be building obstacles for me to get that information, to get that content. The LMS being a repository and a way to distribute those means is not often as effective as Google searches, which is why you have a lot of people who do Google searches in their work and they don't search their e-learning repository.
Well, that's a really good point, because most people that we talk to in large corporations can't find the content. That is the biggest problem they have with the LMSs. The LMSs don't present it that well, and it's a really hard time finding content that they can actually take.
Yeah, so to that point, it's the I'm trying to figure out an elegant way.
Well, here, this will help you. This will help you. When the moment's right, the content's there.
So please, somebody tweet that.
But we've got Cammie out there. I think Cammie's paying a little bit of devil's advocate with these questions, but she's and you may have already answered the first part, but I'm going to ask her questions anyway. She says, "What is SCORM and why do we care?" And then she follows that up with, "Why do we need Tin Can to tell us what we can do?"
Well, what SCORM is it stands for the Shareable Content Object Reference Model, and it basically describes a way of 4 different specs to work together. These specs are, so that there's a spec from IMS that deals with content packaging, and there's a spec from IMS that deals with sequencing of content, of how you deliver content from one piece of content to another, in kind of a flow state. And there's a spec from AICC for the data model, and there's a metadata spec that comes from IEEE and formerly from IMS. And these specs were all developed, independent of each other, but they all kind of serve e-learning, at least certainly as it's been practiced over the last 10 years or more. And what SCORM does is describe how they can work together. All right. And that's really what SCORM does. So why should people care about SCORM? Well, it's at this point now it's extremely widely adopted, almost to the point of, I would say, ubiquitous. Certainly within government institutions, certainly within corporate institutions, not just in the U.S. but around the world. That's why you should care. It does. You could argue that it's a pain in the butt to use, and as a front end developer, I've been there, but it's a lot easier to do it now than it ever was before, and I would argue that the reason why you should care about it is because it's saving you tons and tons of money. Because in order to figure out how to if you were to build content that worked in one system. Mm-hmm. That'd be great and optimal for you until you had to switch your content out of that system into something else.
Well, that's interesting, because that's where most of the problems lie. The interoperability between vendors is where they take the liberty. For example, if you develop something in Adobe, let's say Adobe Captivate, mm-hmm. then you develop something in Lectora, they both maybe address SCORM slightly differently. Not a lot, but enough that for example, one might have lesson status of complete, whereas one has it as, I'm just throwing out a variable kind of idea, and another one might have a C. Little mm-hmm. things like that. That's really more AICC, actually, but
right.
But it's the same thing with SCORM. There are interpretations of how they do. That's what confuses everybody.
Well, Rick, I would say that's probably true of. That's probably true of SCORM 1.2 because they had different levels of conformance
yep.
that were made available. once we start getting into SCORM 2004, with each and every iteration, it's gotten successively better to the point where if you're SCORM 2004, if you're using SCORM 2004 4th edition, and I would say based on what little surveys and research I've seen, there's a whole lot of people who aren't using it.
That's what we find. A lot of people aren't using it yet.
Right, but we can't fix something that nobody. The fix is we upgraded, we fixed the spec. And people who have adopted the spec aren't having these issues, but there's a lot of people who haven't upgraded. So one of the reasons why we're also trying to say that we're completing SCORM is so that there's now incentive for a lot of people who've held out from upgrading to do so now, because this is what it's going to be. If you're going to start making the investment in transferring up your content to the latest and greatest SCORM, well, now you're going to get your money's worth, because it's going to solve a lot of the problems of interoperability that we've had before.
Yeah, that'll be great. It's interesting. It's really getting that message out for the vendors that they really do need to upgrade and get up to that next level, so that the customers really don't have that hard a time.
Well, it's not the vendors. I would say that most vendors are. I mean, there's a lot of vendors, right? And I certainly don't know who they all are, but I would say most of your big names are already doing SCORM 2004, at least 3rd edition, and they're probably going to move to 4th edition pretty soon, especially now that things are stabilizing. It's organizations that have already had this legacy investment in whatever system that they have. Upgrading systems is expensive, and upgrading all of your content could be very expensive. Now, that doesn't mean you have to upgrade all of your content. Most LMSs run a variety of versions of SCORM, right? But
true.
But, there's an interesting conversation going on between. It was not really a long conversation, but a few volleys between Cami and Dave, L&D Dave, and it was regarding the fact that SCORM is kind of invisible until it's not working to our advantage, which kind of brings up a question of how do we utilize SCORM more in the forefront without thinking of it as, okay, if it doesn't work, then I'll be concerned about it. But how do we take advantage of it before it becomes that type of a problem for us?
Well, if I put my content developer hat on, the thing that really cinched it SCORM for me was just the awareness of what I could actually track. A lot of people approach e-learning, and they care about a couple of very big things: bookmarking, or location, some kind of completion status, score. That's about it. And there's so many more things that you can actually track, and just having that awareness that you can track more than just those couple of things, I think really starts making a difference, because you start thinking about what are the possibilities that are available to me versus like what am I imagining are my possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like for example, latency. A lot of people don't track latency. Imagine if you're doing certain kinds of training where you need to measure the speed with which someone responds to something. Maybe you're teaching medical techniques, maybe surgical type techniques. How fast do you do this? Do you take too long? That's actually trackable. Very few people actually use the latency features, other than to say, you started the course here, you ended there, that's about it.
Yeah, and I would say that, looking through a lot of the things that, and hearing about through Tin Can and hearing from people over the last couple of years at DevLearn and in other conferences about things that people wish they could do with their e-learning. Well, a lot of the things that they're asking for, they can already do without doing anything really special. Just understanding what's available to you in the data model. I think that's actually a real credit to the thinking that went into SCORM back in 1998 and 99, is that there's so much in there that people still don't largely tap into.
This is probably a conversation that will go on till the end of time.
And it does.
But there's a lot of people that say the LMS is dead, and there's some people in the chat room that are I guess not really debating it. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of pro for the LMS. Now, I happen to be on the side of not that the LMS is dead, but like any tool, it's misused in many organizations that don't truly understand learning.
And overpriced.
And definitely overpriced.
Way overpriced.
But what do we have to replace the LMS, or what do we have that would accomplish what an LMS accomplishes and what we need it to accomplish without using an LMS? And I don't know if the answer is out there, but I figure I'll throw that out there to you.
I've heard a number of different alternatives to what the LMS as it is today. And I would say before even going into them, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want your LMS to do? So, for example, I talked a little bit earlier about, we may not need an LMS to launch content for us anymore. Okay? But we probably still need something to keep track of, when a learner, has accomplished something or has, passed some kind of competency or reached some kind of skill. So is it a learner management? Is it a learning management? Learning being the verb, not a noun, that needs to happen? I'm not going to weigh in on, mostly, partly because it's not a conversation I'm really interested in, on, like, are LMSs overpriced, things like that. That's not really what I care about. What I care about more is, what is it that we really want to do? Because it's really easy to throw stones and say that something's broken or something doesn't work, but it's really hard to identify what is working.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't find that LMSs are broken or that SCORM is an issue. I think a lot of people don't know what they're doing with them, which is why they run into the problems. That's really the issue. It's not a problem of the LMS not working, though some of them don't work very well. Most of them do. And the ones that do, actually, the whole idea is to be invisible. It just launches. It does what it's supposed to do. People are pretty happy. It's tracking. Very few people actually look at any of the information being tracked afterwards, which is sort of funny. In essence, LMSs are very expensive. That's why I say they're overpriced. They just launch content. Nobody really looks at what's happening afterwards with the content, other than for compliance to say, look, they took the course. There's so much more they could be doing, analytics as to what's working, what isn't working. Are people learning? Is it improving job performance? If you do a balanced scorecard.
But analytics are, you're kind of preaching to the choir here, but I would also say that analytics are largely incumbent on the organization to define what's good. What's good learning look like?
Yeah, and most of them don't care. That's the issue, I think, and that's why the LMS is being blamed for something that the organization doesn't really care about.
You've made my point.
And then when you stack poor learning design on top of that, then you've just got a disaster on your hands.
That was the one.
I was like, what was the yawn for? I'm trying to be
big fingers miss button.
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of this question because it was asked a little bit further back by Stevie, but she was asking, I can't really find the question, so I'll try to paraphrase it a little bit. And I think in part you answered it with the money aspect, but why should the information systems department be interested in an LMS? What's in it for them?
Well, it keeps the e-learning people. It keeps the learning L&D department quiet. I guess that's one reason why they want to care about that. So,
well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. As a recovering IT pro, I spent 25 years in IT. I was a director, manager, programmer, VP of IT for a lot of years. And my thing is, when we looked at learning, it was okay. And I was responsible several times for learning organizations. We had no problem with technology. We loved the technology. That's why I kept saying they were overpriced, because if you're looking at what the cost of running a company software-wise, let's say it was a $500,000 product to run your company, and you're looking at the same amount to run your learning, that's insane. From that point of view, it's too much money for what you get out of it. Especially if you look at just simple data. Most LMSs are very, very simple databases. They're not even all that well designed in some cases. They're not optimized. That's an issue. The bigger ones are, some of them. But it's poor IT software in many cases. I think all the capabilities in SCORM are there. but a lot of the learning departments just implement it, launch it, you're done. That's it. And so,
so my experiences both on both sides of working in an organization that had IT, and I was part of the L&D department that had an LMS, and being a content vendor who usually had to go in and help troubleshoot when content wasn't working in any of these various LMSs. I think a lot of this is my opinion, okay, not ADL Aaron, but just the Beard. And the Beard's opinion on this is, yeah, I like that. I think IT departments like LMSs because it saves them calls of having to deal with, I need to host this content, I need to do this stuff. If an L&D department has their own LMS administrator, and the IT department is in charge of like how, your Active Directory or your LDAP, employees get in and out of the LMS, and that's the only time they touch it, then it's a system that kind of stands on its own, and IT departments don't have to deal with, servicing their issues. They kind of wash their hands of it. The challenge is that in a lot of those organizations, and I've been in quite a few, or been at least involved with quite a few, L&D departments generally don't have a whole lot of highly technical people in them that know how to, they know how to administer the LMS, upload stuff, get it ready make it available, push things out, schedule courses, things like that. When it comes down to like troubleshooting, it becomes really, really hard to find someone who has, web development background skills to understand, then let alone like what's going on with the SCORM tracking.
And the internal IT people may not have any interest in that.
No, they've washed their hands of it.
They do. And it's kind of interesting. IT people are really rather odd this way. If it doesn't benefit their career, they could care less about the software. That's just something I've seen all too often. And it's not a good thing per se, but IT people are saying, if it's not Oracle, if it's not SQL Server, if it's not, I don't care. And they move on. And so the LMS is sort of sitting in its own room. It's in a server room. It's just kind of ignored. It's a cousin of the IT department, I
And remember, the views of the host do not necessarily represent the channel.
10 years is getting around that time. They'll upgrade because they're like, well, I guess we've got to upgrade. And then they'll probably just try and treat it like its own. Because as invisible as SCORM is on the background for content developers, or at least that's how we want it to be, right? And that's why tools like Lectora and Articulate and Captivate are so popular, is because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of developing, and it pushes the ability to make content down to the non-technical realm, the almost non-technical realm.
It makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, but for IT, an LMS, done. It's in the background. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And I would say that your argument, your point about not caring about the things that aren't important to their careers, I'd say that's probably true of a lot of different fields. It's not just IT.
Sure.
Now, Aaron, I know we brought you on to talk about learning activities, and we've kind of pigeonholed you into the SCORM LMS discussion. So
I knew this was going to happen, man.
Well, when you represent ADL, it's kind of hard not to have a discussion on SCORM. But I do want to give you an opportunity to. I guess this little lull here is an opportunity for us to shift gears to talk about the learning activities and sort of get some insight into when you said that was a topic you wanted to talk about, what in particular is of interest in you with learning activities?
Well, there's actually a segue here from what we've been talking about to what I want to talk about, what at least I thought we were going to talk about. So it's all right. SCORM inherently has a pedagogical model that describes how we, a way of interacting with content to develop people, to train people in a certain way, one person at a time, kind of learning on their own. People have tried to apply, and they have succeeded with some success, that sounded horrible. With applying constructivist, theories and stuff like that to, SCORM. But it's not a real natural fit. SCORM is not necessarily about, vicarious discovery. Like, I happen to be on Google and I click on a link because I'm searching for something that interests me, and I decide, I want to track that. That should count. I've learned something, We use Instapaper. You guys use Instapaper? Ever hear of it?
I've heard of
Yep.
it. Yeah, I'm not using it right now.
So Instapaper is really awesome because what it does is it's this little, bookmarklet that sits in your browser for the most part. And when you want to read something for later, you just click it and boom, it captures the web page and it brings it up and presents it really nicely for later. Okay. When you use Evernote, if you guys use Evernote,
I use Evernote all the time. Yep.
Yeah, so it clips things that you find really important to you, okay? Well, every time you clip something and every time you highlight something in your Kindle, your ebook reader, and every time you start taking notes on stuff, and every time you start having a LearnChat or an eLearnChat, and you start having this Twitter conversation about what's going on, there's learning that you're taking part in, but none of that is being captured, okay? One of the things that we wanted to do when we came back to ADL was address how do we capture vicarious learning, and then thinking about it, also thinking about expanding what online or digital learning looks like, thinking about Second Life, thinking about not Second Life but virtual worlds, and thinking about augmented reality, which is starting to emerge as a more popular notion, and thinking about blending those things, then thinking about tying in these mobile devices, okay, and how do you address all those things? And there's a technical way to deal with how we communicate stuff, and that's why we're dealing with the CMI5, and that's why we're dealing with Project Tin Can. But there also needs to be something for instructional design as well to consider, which is that we need to start thinking about designing not just pieces of content that we expect people to kind of take, and passively consume, but we need to start designing learning experiences like teachers do with school children. And we need to start thinking about crafting, the design of an activity that keeps people participating and actively engaged and changes, or tailors to a learner. And that's kind of where this idea of learning activities is coming from. The idea is, and I'll pull a picture up because I was inspired by Cami last week with her visual aids.
We'll just start calling that Cami 2.0 technology.
Where are we here? Oh, that's where I am. It's the iPad 2. It works faster than I do. So,
did you get the iPad 2 already?
Oh yeah.
Lucky
Look
you.
how thin it is.
Nice.
So I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
Yes.
But, okay.
You can't see the content, but we could see the.
Okay. So the idea is here that there's this notion of an activity, and a learning activity. It can be the design of any activity really. It is a balance of context, a greater context, the reason why, the bigger reason why we're doing this thing. And boundary conditions are the rules in which we have to use or, to make sense of it, all right, to operate, the operating rules. And there has to be a balance between those two. But there also has to be a balance between the content that we're using or that's been created to work with in this activity, in any activity, and our participation. All right. If you have all this participation but no content to manipulate with, then there's really not much happening. You're just excited. And if there's if there's all this content but none of it engages your active participation, then that content is just stagnant. There's no learning that's going to happen at all. And and we can probably point to we can imagine several examples of that inside inside of organizational learning today. Same notion, if there's without a greater context but a lot of rules, people don't understand why they're doing anything. They're just kind of spinning wheels. And if you have this greater context but you don't have the tools with which to navigate this big thing that you're all supposed to be working on, then people just tend to get lost, right? But if you can balance those things together, you have a real learning. Ooh, that was cool. I didn't mean to do that. You have this real learning experience that's taking place, and those elements, I think, are what goes into a learning experience. And
but now, I got the impression that you were saying, as an organization, should we be capturing vicarious learning? I like your term there, vicarious learning. Mm-hmm. Or do we teach the learners how to capture their own vicarious learning? Does it need to be institutionalized?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we want to enable both, but mm-hmm. Right now, I would imagine that it gets messy to think about doing both. Mm. I certainly want to enable people to do self-directed learning, from the standpoint of that my learning takes place outside of my organization. Years ago, I passed the mark where my organization could develop my programming skills or develop my speaking skills. Those are things that I had to start doing on my own. That should still count for something, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say that a lot of people, once you're past the first couple of years in a job, any job, what is it that your organization is going to be able to teach you? You're going to have to go outside of your organization, whether it's networking with other people on Twitter, whether it's mm-hmm. Or Facebook, whether it's going to conferences on your own, and all these things are taking place outside of your organization. But there's learning that happens that adds value to the organization, right? That if there's a Venn diagram, it'd be like, here's your organization, here's you, and there's some value going on right over here. Look at that. That's nice. Mm-hmm. And that should be, you should get credit for that. There should be mm-hmm. a with them, both for the organization and you, that they both realize that there's something there.
But I think you're making my argument for not institutionalizing the vicarious learning, the capture of vicarious learning, but instead training our learners how to capture that information, because the institutional learning is finite because there's just so many resources that seem to limit it.
Well, let me give you a reason why organizations should be at least aware of what you're doing. All right. Mm-hmm. And let's assume, myopic as may be, let's assume very positive. Okay. Positive intents. If you have a network set up within your organization and you find that everybody's asking for the same information from each other all the time, and then you start looking at your analytics and you start noticing that people are Googling for these types of queries all the time, that should be indicative to you as that there's a gap in formal instruction that could be used by your L&D department. All right? Then that mm-hmm. gap can help drive, the push of content that would be meaningful because it fills a gap, a performance gap. And that performance gap is the fact that you're searching for answers, and generally it takes a long time to find the right answer. It's one thing if you're looking for factual information about like physics and stuff like that, but if you're in your organization with your own types of rules and your own types of language, and you're looking for the right policy or the right process to do this one thing, and that information isn't easy to find, that's an opportunity for your L&D department to add value.
Now it's interesting because a lot of organizations have Google appliances in their IT department, so they have help desks. They've got a lot of stuff already developed using Google search capabilities mm-hmm. right within their intranet.
But how many of those IT departments are actually monitoring those analytics and informing the L&D departments and the organizational change people?
Yeah, probably not.
We got a lot of searches going on for this. Can we weed this content out because no one can find it?
True. That's probably near zero.
So and that's kind of my point, is that there are organizational culture and process things that we can do to greatly get us to a point where the case we're making for some kind of vicarious capture of what people are doing, from an organizational perspective, that's meaningful, because it could drive the analytics that make better decisions, for organizational decisions about learning and development, that drive better decisions about knowledge management and document management.
Yeah, I definitely hear the argument, and I definitely think it can go both ways. I guess we could throw an informal poll into the chat room and ask what everybody in the chat thinks, whether the informal learning should be I can't use vicarious learning a third time, or else I have to pay you a royalty on it. So
no. You can use it all you want, man. The word is yours.
By the way, for everybody in the chat room, you are getting extra credit for this, and it will go on the LMS.
Yeah. So what do you guys in the chat room think about that? Do you want to institutionalize your informal learning, or do you want to have it learner controlled? And not to skew the poll there, but I almost feel that if for anything to be institutionalized, whatever you're trying to institutionalize has to operate at a slow speed. And to me, learning operates at a much faster speed in this day and age. I mean, maybe there was a time where learning was as slow as the institution, but now I think learning is, faster than the speed of light in some cases.
I think, Terrence, I'll disagree. Learning availability is faster than the speed of light. Learning, I don't know. How many people are that self-directed that they actually learn on their own, want to learn on their own, and go beyond what a corporation is teaching them? Not that many. We're dealing a lot with professionals, but think about people who aren't quote-unquote professionals. They're being told what to do. That's all they really care about. They do their job. They go home.
Well,
it's a different animal.
That kind of brings up the, what's the author's name? He did Linchpin.
You're talking about,
what's his name
I was just talking about him today. Seth Godin.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Seth Godin. He talks about the linchpin, and the linchpin is the ideal employee that we want to foster. And if somebody doesn't want to learn, should they really even be hired? Which brings up a whole nother set of arguments. So, do we build a system to cater to the anchors of business, or do we build a system catered to the catalyst of a business? And in my opinion, I would gear the system more towards the linchpins.
That makes sense.
Well, but there's a danger in that.
Okay.
So I would say that you want to do your hiring based on what are the greater goals of the organization, but that you definitely want people who are self-motivated and self-directed, in key positions. But honestly, if you're looking at line workers, do you need the most self-directed line worker in the entire world that wants to self-actualize?
Seth would argue you would do.
Really?
Actually, you don't need that.
I'm not trying not to make a judgment here on any way, but I think we need to be realistic. There are a lot of people who are very self-directed in their learning, but self-directed by whose definition, and learning by whose definition.
Right. But for example, let's take the line worker example. Yeah. In the Japanese Kaizen principles, every line worker has the ability to stop the line when they see quality issues. Mm-hmm. And that takes the worker outside of their normal experience. That actually empowers them to a certain point to say,
absolutely,
I see a problem. And that's something we haven't implemented that well here, for example, as well as, let's say, the Japanese have. But that is something where line workers can actually make a difference. And the more they pay attention to what they're good at, or what they perceive themselves to be good at, the more they can influence the bottom line of the company, and everyone benefits.
I agree with you, Rick. So the question then becomes, is the challenge hiring the right worker, or is the bigger challenge creating the right environment for workers to be that empowered?
I would almost say it's both. It's a combination of both. You need to start with the raw materials, if you will, and then you need something to cook that material to make it really turn into a good dish. And at the same time, once they're more formed, you also have to give them the power to grow and to influence. Because in essence, let's say you're in a team environment. Every team member has a crucial part in that environment, and every team member offers their strengths, weaknesses, whatever else, but contributes to it. When you have a team when half the people are doing something, the other half are sitting around going, "Who am I?" Obviously, you're going to have a pretty miserable team. You're going to have some people that just aren't contributing to the team. So it is. I think it's both. You do need good starting materials. If you're creating sourdough bread, you need that starter dough, and then from there it can turn into a lot of different kinds of breads.
Yes, and so I think that there's an argument that about once a month I hang out with a bunch of guys who are really into metacognition, because once a month is probably all you need. That's a little bit of culture, that little sourdough culture, right? But their argument would be, and I would tend to agree with this, is that you want to help nurture these little networks, where people are these little pockets of innovation or really high performance inside of organizations, where people kind of are working on their own. And then you want to, not all the time, because otherwise they're not working on their own anymore, but you want to drop that into a bigger mix. And what happens is that they, like a good sourdough culture, right, it starts changing the flavor of the organization by taking what's working in one organization and mixing it in with other organizations. Now, the flip side of that is that pocket of high productivity, high performance, you need to continually bring new people into their little group slowly but surely. This is my thought, because the act of mentoring others and initiating others into how they do things forces re-examination of their practices. Yeah,
it opens their eyes a bit.
Yeah, because it's like you're starting from scratch again, and somebody comes in with whatever perspective that they have. They're asking questions in a different way than maybe someone has asked them before, and that changes that little sourdough culture. And if you go too long without feeding it new stuff, it tends to start going rancid.
Terrence, I don't know about you, but I'm getting hungry.
I'm getting hungry too.
And I love sourdough.
Well, not after his last quote of rancid sourdough bread, but...
well, not that one, but...
Well, and it almost sounds like we constructed a great starting point in that it seems to come back on both stakeholders in learning, the institution as well as the learner. And if the two can, in an ideal situation, if the two can work together to develop learning infrastructure, then it seems like it would be in the best interest of the macro community. So, maybe that is the answer. Maybe it's not. Do we institutionalize it? Do we democratize it? Maybe it has to be, a little bit of both. The organization is part of the learning community just as much as the learner is. Oh, did I silence you?
I'm largely agreeing with you. You gotta give me something that I'm not going to agree with.
We're all in deep contemplation right now. Yes.
It's not that often that I quiet a room.
Actually, we're all thinking about food. So
I didn't have any food analogies that I could throw into that one. So I'll think of one on my next rant.
Well, think of a pizza. Here's another food analogy. You start with dough, you start with your bottom, and then you start adding ingredients to that. And when you're finally done, you've got something that tastes pretty good and can actually make you feel good. So, adding more than just the dough. So each different component adds more to that equation. Except pineapple. Pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, but that's an existential issue.
I like my Hawaiian pizza.
But see, I would start going contextual. I'd say by whose definition of good pizza? I mean, are you a New York style pizza? Are you a Chicago, deep dish style pizza?
Well, Terrence and I both grew up in New York, so we're probably more New York style pizzas.
Yeah, but now you guys live in California, and you're all in the wood burning pizza.
California doesn't even know how to make pizza out here.
They don't.
It's been the biggest disappointment of
It's
the
bad.
matter.
It's bad.
This gut didn't happen living in Chicago just because of the tuna fish sandwiches. So,
yeah, the Chicago pizza is good. I've been out there. It is good.
Right. It's definitely not bad.
No, but in essence, that's what our talk's all about. If you think about it, you get a couple of people from New York, a couple of people from Chicago, a couple of people from other places, and you put them together, they'll probably come up with some pretty good pizza. Unless they're in California, in which case it's just an aberration. But that's another issue.
Well, so to that mode, I mean, I think that the worst pizza I've ever had was actually in the Netherlands.
Interesting.
Oh, it was awful.
I think Liv is in the room right now, and she's from Belgium, and she could probably vouch for that.
We'll see if she
I don't know.
comments
Maybe I
in
went to
there.
the wrong place, but it was not at
Actually,
the
the
falafel
worst
sandwich was fantastic.
Well, believe it or not, the worst clam chowder I ever had was in Boston.
Ooh.
At a hotel. Go figure. Well, because it was a hotel, so that's probably part of it. The Hilton didn't have a good cook. But clam chowder, Boston, you'd think that would be really good? No, it was awful.
Good clam chowder, and to all the viewers out there, I have no idea how we got from SCORM to clam chowder, but we did somehow.
Well, we started with SCORM, and then we got really, really deep into metacognition and leadership and practice, and then we got right back to food. So
Yeah.
I would say we're covering all our.
Well, you know what? It's all about sustainability. If we don't sustain ourselves with food, there will be no cognition.
That's right. Food will enter into every conversation when you deal with three hungry men.
That sounds like another TV series, Three Hungry Men.
3 hungry men. That's right.
No, because that would require winning.
Winning.
I had prompts ready to go. I was inspired by Cammy's performance.
And
Yes.
Cammy's trying to tie it back to an LMS. She's asking, how do you track pizza in your LMS? Choose, Tammy. How many chews? How many toppings? How many slices? There's all your answers to your LMS and pizza.
And whether it's a compliant lunch. If it is, then you have to eat more.
That's right.
Well,
did you eat more than you ate last time?
We don't talk about compliance. We talk about conformance. There is a vocabulary difference. But does it conform to the USDA standards for proper nutrition, for example? And then which version of those standards do you go with? Do you go with the food pyramid or whatever the model is now? Because I don't know what the model is now, but I know it's not the food pyramid. There's all sorts of conformance mashups we can do if you'd like.
Absolutely. And Gina says we're making her hungry too. So we better get off the food topic before we change the obesity standards in this country.
While Aaron was on the screen, I was eating my iPad, so I understand how that feels.
I give it time. I'm sure Jobs will come up with the edible iPad.
And it'll be small. Fat-free.
Well, I think we're coming out here at the top of the hour here, or the bottom of the hour, depending on which side.
I think we are. We're about to wrap this one up.
Yeah, Aaron, you were great. Anything you want to plug there, Aaron? We didn't ask if you were talking at Learning Solutions.
No, I'm not. I'm not at Learning Solutions. I'm at Game Tech at the same time in Orlando.
That sounds
as
more
Learning
fun.
Solutions.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be pretty awesome. I'm doing a social games workshop on day one with Dr. Alicia Sanchez. That's GameZar, and Chris Rockwell, Hybrid Chris. We're going to be talking about social games, but I think we're going to hang out with a lot of Learning Solutions people, at nighttime and off hours and stuff like that.
Is that also in Orlando?
Yeah, that's also in Orlando.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Where are you doing it?
We're at the Caribe Royale.
Okay. It's on Disney property.
Sounds awesome when I say it like that. Caribe
That's also
Royale.
Disney property?
I honestly don't know if it's a
Okay.
Disney.
I'm not sure.
I hear steel drums in the background when you just say that.
I know. Doesn't it sound awesome? It sounds awesome.
It sounds like a fun place.
I would say that if I can plug a couple things, Project Tin Can, SCORM.com/tincan. We are accepting people's input up until the end of this month. So if there's anything that you want in your e-learning, digital learning experiences, please, there's a forum out there. Vote stuff up. You can add new items, new requests that have not been identified yet. You can sign up for it to be interviewed. They'll call you. You can call them. You'll talk to somebody. Ben Clark from Rusty Software will talk to you, and you don't have to do anything but sit on the phone and chat. And we desperately want your use cases, whatever that is that they are. That's the only way that we're going to be able to build something that people really want.
That's great.
Okay. And I did put that URL scorm.com/tincan into the chat room there. I'll be sure to tweet that as well for you. And next week, just another reminder, we are dark next week. Rick and I will be at Learning Solutions. So if anybody's there, please come up to us and say hello so we can meet you live. Also, the week after, when we come back, we'll be doing our Learning Solutions recap. So it'll be Rick and I, and we don't quite know who the guest is going to be yet for that, but hopefully we'll get somebody from the eLearning Guild to come on with us. Maybe if you guys know Brent, reach out to him and say, I hear the guys over at eLearnChat are looking for somebody to talk about learning solutions. But we'll be, for those of you that aren't attending, and even if those of you that are attending, we'll be recapping that for you. And then April 5th, we come back with Jane Bozarth. So we'll be talking about social media for trainers.
Don't miss Dr. Jane.
And she is in the chat room now, too.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Well, anyway, for everybody in the chat room and who watches this also on Vimeo, thank you so much for watching. Aaron, thanks so much for coming on board. This was fun, and we hope to have you on again. Actually, I'd like to have you on when you have some more results from Project Tin Can. As long as you don't kick the can down the road, right?
No, I'd love to. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna wrap up the requirements gathering at the end of this month, and we're gonna actually start building stuff, probably starting in April. So
that sounds cool. Good stuff.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. This was fun.
More than welcome. Terrence, we'll see you next. I don't know if we'll actually catch up with each other in Orlando, depending when you arrive. We're leaving Wednesday afternoon, so...
We might see each other. We'll have to make some plans. I think I get in Tuesday night, so maybe we'll make some plans to see each other Tuesday night.
That sounds good.
And Aaron, I'll be sure to look you up while I'm down there, too.
Awesome.
That sounds good. So anyway, we're going to close the show out. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.